Harold Whitman had been a mailman for over 30 years in the small, quiet town of Maplewood. It was the kind of place where everybody knew your name, your family, and often even your secrets. The streets were lined with tall oaks, their leaves turning shades of gold and crimson every fall. Houses, each with their own stories, stood shoulder to shoulder along the sidewalks, many with flower beds bursting with colors during springtime. Every morning, Harold would wake up before dawn, lace up his sturdy boots, and put on his worn mailman's uniform. His routine was almost sacred. He would eat a simple breakfast, grab his leather mailbag, and step out into the crisp morning air. The smell of dew on grass and freshly brewed coffee from the nearby cafe always greeted him as he began his route. Harold loved his job. It wasn't just about delivering letters and packages, it was about connecting people. In a time before emails and instant messaging, letters were the lifelines between friends, lovers, and families separated by distance and circumstance. Harold often paused for a moment at certain houses, knowing a letter inside might bring tears, laughter, or a long-awaited reunion. One chilly autumn day in 1976, as Harold sorted through the day's mail, he noticed something strange. Among the neatly stacked envelopes was a yellowed letter with no proper address. The name Ethan was written faintly on the front, but there was no street name, no city, no postal code, nothing else. Harold frowned. How could a letter travel all this way and yet have no destination? Curious, he set the letter aside, determined to find the owner. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Harold asked around town, showed the letter to neighbors, the local post office workers, and even the librarian. No one knew an Ethan who had recently lived in Maplewood. The letter stayed with Harold, folded carefully in his coat pocket. It became a silent mystery, a puzzle piece from a forgotten past that tugged at his heart. Sometimes when the sun was setting and his route was done, he would take out the letter and wonder about Ethan, who he was, where he had gone, and what story that lost letter held inside. Retirement for Harold Whitman came like a quiet whisper after decades of routine and devotion to his small town. His days were no longer filled with the rustling sound of envelopes or the familiar jingling of the mailbag. Yet, something inside him remained restless, the unanswered mystery of the forgotten letter. Though his uniform hung untouched in the closet, Harold's determination to find Ethan never faded. He pored over old town records at the Maplewood Library, paging through dusty ledgers and faded newspapers. He spoke with old residents who had seen the town change through generations, hoping to find a clue, a thread to pull. The name Ethan led him to an old address on Magnolia Lane, a street that had once been lively but was now quieter, almost forgotten by time. Harold walked the lane slowly, observing the houses, some freshly painted, others worn and sagging with age. He stopped at a small, weather-beaten house, where a few faded toys lay scattered in the yard, relics of childhood long past. Asking neighbors, Harold learned that Ethan was a boy who had lived there many years ago, but had vanished under mysterious circumstances. No one knew exactly where he went or why he left. The silence around Ethan's story was deafening. Harold's search became more than just a curiosity. It turned into a mission, a promise he made to himself that he would deliver that letter, no matter how long it took. He felt that somewhere, Ethan or someone who loved him was waiting for that final message. A connection from the past, bridging the gap of years and lost time. Magnolia Lane held memories like fragile glass. When Harold finally met Martha, Ethan's mother, he saw the lines of sorrow and hope etched deeply into her face. Her house smelled faintly of lavender and old books. The porch creaked underfoot as they spoke quietly about Ethan, about lost time and lingering love. Martha clutched the letter Harold had found. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, Ethan's childish handwriting spilled out a message full of love, fear, and hope. My dearest Mom, I'm sorry I left. I was scared, but I think of you every day. Please don't give up on me. Martha's tears fell freely. For years, she had wondered if Ethan was alive, if he remembered her. The letter was proof, a fragile lifeline stretching across time, whispering a son's love and regret. Harold stayed with Martha for a while, listening to her stories about Ethan, his laughter, his stubbornness, the day he disappeared. The letter had changed everything. It was not just a piece of paper, it was a reunion waiting to happen. While Harold was reconnecting with Martha and unraveling pieces of Ethan's past, far away in a small, dimly lit apartment in a bustling city, Ethan himself sat alone. The walls around him were bare, except for a worn photograph of his mother, smiling softly, framed on a crooked shelf. Years ago, Ethan had run away from Maplewood. The reasons were tangled in pain, fear, and a childhood shadowed by struggles he had never fully spoken about. He had left behind the only home he knew, chasing an uncertain future in a place where no one knew his name. But no matter where he went, his heart carried the ache of separation. He had written letters, words poured out in the quiet nights, letters filled with apologies, confessions, and love. Yet those letters never reached their destination. Lost in the postal maze, swallowed by time, they faded into nothingness. One evening, as Ethan sifted through old belongings, a letter arrived. Not just any letter, his letter. The very letter Harold had guarded all these years, finally delivered to his mother, and then returned to him through a twist of fate. Reading his own words, seeing the love and hope he had sent years before, Ethan's eyes welled up. For the first time in decades, he felt a fragile thread of hope weaving through his heart, tying him back to the place he'd called home. The past was no longer just a shadow, it was a doorway, waiting to be opened. Back in Maplewood, in his modest living room, Harold Whitman sat quietly in his favorite armchair, the morning sun casting warm golden hues through the curtains. On the small wooden table beside him lay a letter, one addressed to him, from a woman who had once been a child receiving his daily mail. The letter was simple but powerful. It thanked Harold for decades of quiet kindness, for being the unseen thread that held the community together, for the smiles and care that often went unnoticed. It spoke of how his work had touched lives in ways he never imagined. Harold's eyes softened with tears. He realized then that the small acts, delivering letters, offering a smile, holding on to a forgotten letter, were the true legacy of his life. As he folded the letter carefully, he whispered to the silence around him, "I'm home." And in that moment, the house seemed warmer, fuller. The connections he had nurtured over a lifetime, like invisible roots beneath the earth, had blossomed into something beautiful, a story of love, hope, and the power of never giving up.